Jyn Yates, I'm a huge fan. I love your work. You're just, refreshing. And I think you got skills, shorty. So keep it bouncing yet again.
We get it. I do my hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair talk, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Drop a trailer on them. Trying to cause a big sensation. I'm just talking about my. We get it. H to the I to the L L B to the I to the L L Y. Singing. They just say I'm not the baddest bitch you like. Ain't my fault that I'm out here getting loose. Gotta blame it on the goose. Gotta blame it on my juice, baby. Bougie. Just talking about my generation.
Happy Tuesday to you. I am Jyn Yates, the Generator, and we are broadcasting live from LRS102.com, the Walrus, from the Launch Louisville studio down on East Broadway. And I'm super pumped today because I have one of my favorites in here, Cheyenne Mize. How are you doing, lady?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Jen?
I am, hanging in there. I was just telling you about, I just came from a funeral of a bass player of mine for many years and multiple projects. I don't know if you've lost someone that close to you when you've played music with them, but it is incredibly hard. You're a music therapist too, aren't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know what your experience is, but mine has been tough. I've lost two of my top, players. As a drummer, I play an accompaniment instrument, obviously. So it's not like I can just go out and play gigs myself. I have to have a crew, and a band to do that. And so we're going to say rest in peace, Sue Riley, who's now over on the other side being an angel. And I just spun a track from Ma'am Overboard called The Devil in Me. I've got a lot of her original works still left, so we're going to play some today. So anyway, tough loss. I went to the funeral yesterday and said I paid my respects, and here we are. And I'm glad to actually have you in the studio on a completely different note because I haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
But we got to do some work back in the day. You hired me for a few things, and we did the Headliners event, which was, didn't you produce that?
Yeah, it was actually a fundraiser for a nonprofit that I was helping run at the time. And we had done a couple different Battle of the Bands style fundraisers. And this one was the Battle of the Queens.
Yeah.
We had done Battle of the Kings the year before with Elvis Presley. And,
I didn't know that.
And Michael Jackson, yeah.
Cool.
So there were two bands. We had so many musicians around Louisville that wanted to be involved and that we wanted involved, that we needed more bands and more topics. So we did Queens, and so we had Queens of Country, Queens of Soul, Queens of Rock, and Queens of Drag.
Yeah, I was in the Queens of Drag. I love that. and I think they put me on because that was the first time I ever played with Kimmett Cantwell, which I worked beside Kimmett for many years, but we just never got to play together. We loved each other, Right. And technically, I guess we played together, but she was in the side as a drag queen was singing her, she was doing the lyrics live while the drag queen was...
Yeah, ghost singing.
Yeah, ghost singing or whatever you want to call it, lip syncing, whatever. But that was an interesting thing, and kudos to you for that and your work with nonprofits, and we're going to talk all that today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was fun, and then we also did the 21C happy birthday thing for Stephen Brown, right?
For Steve, yeah.
Cool.
Wilson is his last name.
Oh, Steve Wilson. Yeah, sorry about that. The red glasses man. Yeah. That was such a cool gig. I met some really cool people there. So thank you for that as well. So Cheyenne, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about what you've done in your music career. I've been following you for quite some time on social media, and I've seen you do some really awesome things. And I think you're a great person, so that's why I wanted to have you on the show today.
Well, thanks, Jen.
Can we start by just you telling our listeners, how did you get your start in music? Were you born into a family of musicians, or how did you playing come about, and what all do you play?
Yeah, I definitely was born into a musical family. A lot of my family members played instruments. My aunt played piano when I was little, so I wanted to start playing piano, which I did early on. And my uncle played guitar, so I really wanted to learn how to play guitar, so I started that pretty early on. Also, So my fun fact, my dad and mom both worked for WLRS in the 70s.
Wow, no kidding.
And that's how they met.
That is amazing. Well, welcome to
yeah.
LRS again.
Yeah, and my dad is listening out there. I'm fairly
Hi,
certain.
Dad.
So,
Yeah.
I know he was really excited to see this come full circle and see me on WLRS
Yeah.
Live.
So you probably know quite a bit about LRS, maybe, right?
I know
mean,
quite a lot about the history and
Yeah.
stuff.
We've been around since '64.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I actually was working for LRS before they went under, and then I came in to do an interview like you on the Hillbilly Swagger project, and they said, "Hey, we trained you on the board back in the day, and do you need a job because we need a female host from 2 to 4?" And I said, "Sure." They said, "You can do anything you want," and I was like, "Awesome!" So I'm going to use my platform for good and to get musician stories out there.
From everything I've heard, that's hard to come by. So congratulations on that.
I
Glad to have
agree.
you.
Yeah, same. I love LRS. I was a big fan. I've always been a rocker. My dad was a rocker. I come from a musical family too. My dad was a drum set player. He put me on a kit. I mean, basically, I was going to gigs when I was in the womb, of my mom. So
Another positive of that is that I ended up with a secondhand, very amazing record collection from music all from the 60s and 70s rock that LRS used to play.
Yeah.
Of course, back then, I think they would more likely, put on a whole side of a record and then go
yeah,
go have some fun in the back
some
room.
fun in the back alley. Yeah, we have
And
a back
then,
alley here too.
and then
Not
come
that
back
I
after
use
the
it.
side is done.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. We're going to bring back those records, those homemade records. We're going to bring that back.
Yeah, LRS did some really neat things. One of the best things that I think should come back is that like pretend festival, where it was a fantasy festival.
Yeah.
Where basically they pretended as if they were, streaming live from some kind of hypothetical festival, and they played all the best music and live tracks and just pretended like
Cool.
it was happening live.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, Skinny J, if you're listening, you need to take notes on that.
Fantasy Fest. Look it
Fantasy
up.
Fest.
Also, I hear at one of the LRS fests, it was always a thing where they would advertise if it got above 102 degrees, everybody got free beer.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
I think it happened once.
Oh, well, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. You know more history about LRS than I do. That's amazing that your parents met working at LRS. It's full circle, and it's very spiritual.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah. Well, that's super cool. And hi, Mom and Dad, if you're listening. So, yeah, very cool. Well, we're going to start doing a lot of things that LRS used to do and bringing them back. We're happy to be back on the airwaves. I think everybody in the community wanted to see LRS back. I mean, they're historic when it comes to rock and roll,
Sure.
and in the city. And the coolest part about nowadays is it's very new school. We get to stream live. So we're not just on a radio dial in your car. We're on your smartphones and your tablets and your computers. If you're overseas, and I've had people call me, or message me and say, "Hey, I'm in Holland and I'm listening to you," or "Hey, I'm in Japan and I'm listening to you." And I was like, that's just wild to me. But at the same time, we can also have call-ins, from all over the world. And I've had some great interviews with musicians and Broadway stars, out there on tours and stuff like that. Chick drummers, obviously, I love to feature because I'm one myself.
Absolutely.
And we're just going to use this platform for awesomeness. So you were born into a very musical family. When did you play your first gig?
That didn't come till much late. Well, actually, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I played in orchestras in school, so
Okay.
I'm sure, probably in middle school somewhere. I
Yeah.
played some high school or, middle school orchestra thing.
What's your favorite instrument to play? Because you do play so many different ones.
It depends on what kind of music I'm playing.
Okay.
Because I play kind of a lot of things. If I would have just
I
ever
noticed.
concentrated on one instrument or one kind of music, I might have
Yeah.
might have
Yeah.
really done something.
Yeah, I hear you. And we've talked about this with other musicians. I think if you're going to make it as a musician, which I've done for the past 12 years and you've done yourself, you have to be a hustler, and you do have to know every style, I feel like, across the board. I do a lot of theater stuff, a lot of orchestra stuff. I love to read music. I love the actual written notation of music, but I don't think you can just be in a cover band around town and play like one style and that's it. You know what I mean? If you're going to try to make it, you need to branch out and do your own thing. And another thing I really like about you, Cheyenne, is that you are a creative artist yourself. You've put out solo records, right, over the years, and I've always enjoyed those. I thought they were fantastic.
Thank you. But yeah, to
Yeah.
kind of answer your question, I like violin when I'm playing with other people. I like guitar when I'm performing on my own, and I like piano when I'm playing by myself.
I love that. I love that. Why do you think that is? Guitar, is it like a security blanket or something? Because I love you on violin. I think you're amazing.
It's hard. I can't. It's really hard to sing and play violin at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I love
I
to
could
sing.
see that. Yeah. What are the difficulties in that? I mean, you're holding the way that you've got to bend your head where a mic would be, or
it's less. It's more cognitive than that. Violin doesn't have any frets, so you have to be intonating. You have to be tuning every single note with like micro movements.
Yeah.
So not just like which finger you put down, but literally rolling a finger could be the difference between an in-tune note and an out-of-tune note.
Wow.
So when you're singing, you do kind of the same thing. You're tuning your voice. So if you're playing violin and singing at the same time, you have to hear both notes and know which one is in and which one is out, and then know which way to adjust them. So it's just like it's a much more complicated cognitive process than playing a guitar, where you have like an inch and a half leeway to put your finger down. It's a lot easier.
That's interesting, fascinating.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't play any stringed instruments. I do play a little rhythm guitar, but that's it. But I did start on, I started on drums, but clarinet and bass clarinet and saxophone, where I was always a woodwindy type chick. But I also did pit in the marching band. So I did a lot of marimbas and timpani and, cool things. We got to play like brake drums on cars and things like that. That's why I love percussion. Like in Les Mis, you're playing like railroad ties with sledgehammers and chains and stuff like that. It's so fun. So I want to go back to you putting out your solo stuff. When did you decide, hey, I want to start putting out my own creative works of art?
It was really a process. I always knew I wanted to play music with people more than for people, and I found music therapy as a career and as a kind of path in my studies, and went to the University of Louisville for music therapy. So I was started performing a little bit with bands around town at that time, started playing like backup fiddle, laying down tracks on different people's albums and things, started playing different kinds of music, started in a band called Arnett Hollow, and we started...
I have a lot of your records in my garage.
We started playing, I do too, but more like boxes.
Yeah.
We started playing more around town. I got more used to the idea of performing with a band. I started writing a little bit at that time, but not much. It was mostly like stuff on my own. But I ended up with this batch of songs and had a little bit of time after I traveled around with the Bonnie Prince Billy Band for a little while in 2009. I had a few months where I could kind of concentrate on something of my own, and I just wanted to see what those songs sounded like if I recorded them professionally. I'd done versions of them by myself, but I knew that they could, wanted to hear what they'd sound like when someone else helped me that knew what they were doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So my first record was put together around 2009, 2010.
Okay, cool.
And I played all the instruments and did all the vocals, and just decided to kind of see what I could do.
Yeah, I think that's when I really got turned on to you, because I saw your solo stuff first. And people had been talking to me about you, because I'm immersed in the scene too, and everybody's, it's so funny how we can be in the same scene for years and never meet each other. Arnett Hollow, I worked with Dave Chandler and Rhodey. And I remember when y'all put that out, because I was working at Mom's Music teaching with them. And I had no idea you were in that band until today. That's why I love this show. I learn all kinds of new stuff.
Yeah, we played together for about 5 years.
Well, somehow, I don't know if it was Dave or Rhodey, but somebody gave me literally 20 of your CDs, and I don't even know why they gave them to me. But they've been stacked, the yellow cover one, they've been stacked in my garage for a long time. They've been moved around a few times.
Find somebody to give them to.
I will. I absolutely will, just for you. Yeah, so that's super cool. I myself love the creative arts aspect, because I feel like I play a character almost in my solo work, and I say things that maybe I shouldn't say on a daily. And I've talked about this with other artists that come in that put out solo stuff. I use music as my therapy. As you're a music therapist, you would know. I use it to get emotions out of me that maybe I don't know exactly how to get out on a daily basis, you know what I mean? Or in the real physical realm of the world. And I feel like in music and as an art, I mean, we can literally say anything we want to in our music. And I've talked a lot about, the Dixie Chicks can put Earl in the trunk and kill him off because he beat some girl, Bob Marley can shoot a sheriff in a song, Eminem can rip his mom a new one. It's acceptable when it's in art. However, you can't really do some of that stuff on on a personal level in your daily life. So I always feel like if kids had a way to express themselves today, we probably wouldn't have as much shootings going on and stuff like that. If they had a way to channel that emotion into something artistic, it would be a much better place. And that's the first thing that they always cut when, they go into these schools. And I'm a big proponent about, art should come first, really.
Yeah, I agree.
And I forget what's the famous quote. It's the chick from the Cosby Show. Felicia Rashad, where she says, like, before a child can walk, they dance. Before they can talk, they sing. And it's like art is a fundamental basic human right, in my opinion. It's a basic human right.
Yeah. No, I think creativity is a huge part of being a human, and unfortunately, it's right now in a lot of ways only available to people who have that privilege and that and wealth to do that kind of thing, to take time off to go be creative in some way. Right. And so that's the Strive, the nonprofit that Nina Rodehofer and I ran together. Talk a little bit
about that, because I love your nonprofit work.
Yeah, so Nina is Rhodey's sister, Nina Rodehofer, and that's how I met her, was through Chris. We actually met because we were both working in hospitals, kind of tired of seeing people who we really felt like we weren't helping on a human level, even though we might have been treating them medically. Yeah. And coming back over and over again, more because they didn't have a support network than because they were actually sick. And so we wanted to do more, and we're talking a lot about this idea of creativity and how much the arts, all different forms of them, are really what brings people together and can get people in a room who wouldn't normally be there at the same time, and all those things, and how important that is for a community for so many different reasons. So we started Strive as a nonprofit. We started working on it in 2014. And I believe got our 501c3 in 2015. Ray Rizzo, who of course is a big...
He's coming in here
big
in a
reason.
Few weeks. Yeah.
Big reason that we kind of know each other, I think. He was one of our board members from the start, really helpful. His mission with Mother Lodge and everything is so much in line with what we were doing. So basically did everything we could to provide creative opportunities, what we called creative wellness, but just creative opportunities to folks who maybe wouldn't necessarily have that option, and at a regardless of ability to afford that kind of thing.
Can people still donate to that, or is it still around, or where is this now?
We have dissolved at this point. Okay. We put in 5 good years of splitting of full-time salary and begging our friends and family, to pay our own salary and really trying to make it work. But it was too much in the end for us to keep going with the amount of financial support and community support that we had. We knew if we could stick it out another 5 years or so, it was really going to be something great. But at that point, we just kind of had other things that we could keep doing in the same line and just not necessarily have to run a nonprofit. So fortunately, I've been able to continue a lot of that work, and Nina's nursing again, and we just don't do it under Strive anymore.
Well, still, thank you for your time for that, because I'm a big fan of all nonprofit. I don't know if you know, but I just produced She Castle. I asked you to do it, but you were out of town or whatever. Which I believe might be the first all women's female music festival here. We had only women on stage.
Yeah, there was that Outskirts Festival, but I think it was not all.
Well, when I met Beverly McClellan, who it was in honor of, and it was to raise money from 2 nonprofits, which were about to donate the money to Girls Rock Louisville, which you're probably familiar with, and another 501c3 called Successful Living, that is like a transitional sober home for like homeless women and children. Bev loved to play a lot of, she loved to play for a charity. So I thought, what can I do in her honor? Because I wanted to celebrate her life here and all the music she had done here in Kentucky. When I met her, we were on stage at an all-women's music festival, and it was all women run, all women on stage. That was the rule, and it was the first ever and it ran for 40 years. And I think there's one now. It's since dissolved, but there's one now called National Women's Music Festival that does the exact same idea. And nothing against guys, we love guys, but it's just something beautiful when you have all these women on stage together. So that was the idea. I put together the female house band, and we had all these different singers kind of rotating in and out, and then all the proceeds are donated off. So in her honor, yeah. So She Castle, and we're gonna try to keep that going as an annual thing here in Louisville, Kentucky. Next year, grow it, get a bigger stage, have a bigger band, have more singers, hopefully bands eventually, and make it all about the girl power, kind of stuff. So I'm all about that. Yeah. So let's see, what else have you done in your career that we haven't talked about so far? Because you've traveled the world. That's another big thing that I love. I'm always kind of paying, and I know you're not on social a lot, but every time.
I'm really bad at the social media, everybody. Sorry.
It's all good. It's not for everybody. And honestly, if I didn't use it for business, I probably wouldn't be on it either, because it drives me crazy too. As much as I love it, I hate it,
I think that was maybe like one of the big X's for my solo career, is just my my distaste for self-promotion in general.
Yeah, for self. Yeah.
Really not into it.
It's funny. I've written a lot of songs about social media. I wrote a song called "Block a Bitch," which I played my own bitch, but it was from my experience of social media, my thoughts of it, and how people just use like the block to just be a jerk sometimes, you know what I mean? And I literally just wrote a true story about what happened. So I talk a lot about social media in my tracks, trying to just bring them into modern times, because I once did this one on Snapchat. The whole thing was all about Snapchat and Googling me and all this stuff, and it was just being silly, honestly, but it was just a way to poke fun at social media,
Yeah.
So I totally get that.
Yeah. But I did, the bulk of my traveling was with the Bonnie Prince Billy Band. Bonnie Prince Billy being a Louisville kind of cult folk artist, Will Oldham.
Yeah.
And has gone by several names. Also used to put out music under the Palace Brothers.
Cool. I don't know much about him, but I would love to get him on the show.
He's an incredibly prolific artist. I think when the idea came out of me joining his band for an upcoming tour in 2009, so I met him in 2008, and I think once the decision had been made that I was going to be in the band singing backup and playing violin, he handed me a stack of 17 CDs of his. Wow, that's a lot. And that was in 2009, so this is now there's like 10 more years of records, and there's about one a year, I'm pretty sure, since then. So but yeah,
so
he handed
busy.
me
he's busy writer.
Handed me a stack of 17 records, and said basically it was all up for grabs, and I had 7 months to kind of learn it all. And so I learned all of his catalog up to date.
7 months to learn 17
basically.
Records?
Yeah, sort of.
Wow, that's wild. That's a lot of music.
Yeah, because we, as a band, would kind of choose our set list every night, so everything was on the table. It was like, depending what era was our favorite, whoever was picking the songs. Yeah. So it was all over the place.
Did he let the band pick the songs?
Yeah, we did like a round robin. So he would pick the first 3, and then we would go around the group, and then like each person would get one choice, and then we'd keep passing the book along. That is super cool.
I have never heard of that ever.
Crazy set list. Yeah. And by the end of it, I think we had worked up like over 100 tunes together. We played 75 shows in 90 days. Wow. Across the U.S. and Canada, and across Europe and the UK. After that, when I started doing some solo stuff, I was able to travel. With the band Vanderveer. Another Louisville guy, Mark Charles. He's now putting out solo stuff under Mark Charles, but he and this other woman, Rosie Guerin, used to call their group Vanderveer, and I got to travel with them not only around the country, kind of playing in their band and opening for them, but then we also did a month in France once, which is really great. Wow, that's super cool. And then just some kind of other random times. Last fall went with my band Maiden Radio that plays mostly traditional and old time stuff. We went to Ireland and in the UK and traveled some over there as well.
Yeah, Maiden Radio, are they still around?
We are. One of our bandmates, Joan Shelley, she is doing really well with her solo stuff. Pretty like a folk artist, and is doing really well, opening up for some really great people all around the world. Just got back from the Newport Folk Festival. I texted her when she was being interviewed by the Rolling Stone, blah, blah, blah. This is like
Super
a normal
cool.
thing
Yeah.
for her in her life right now, which is really awesome. But she's
good
not
for her.
often in town for us to do much. Plus, Julia and I, the other two in the band, we are both music therapists and we both work regularly. So, kind of fitting in, not to mention Julia has a family, and, so we're all trying to fit stuff in. It was never meant to be a working band for us. We just really loved singing together. So, we will continue to do some stuff down the road. We just
very cool.
don't know when or where. We hope we will be, old ladies sitting on a porch singing together, and hopefully we'll get to continue to share that with the world somehow. But
Man, I love that. Obviously, just coming out of what I just came out of, all my girls surrounded. There was, 4 or 5 of us that were just really kind of close and had been playing together for so many years. And these girls had been playing longer than me. I kind of came in. I moved to Louisville in '99, so I didn't find them until much later, but they had all been playing together, and they had these beautiful harmonies. And I always say harmonies make or break a band. I really love to hear harmonies, especially certain tonalities, clashing together or whatever.
sure.
But it's, man, what a loss when we have to go through that and you lose somebody you think you're going to be sitting on a porch with, playing the rest of your life. You know what I mean? So it was a tough loss, but kudos to you for finding people like that you can have in your life, because I love a magical spark. I'm always looking for that. And once you've probably found this too, because you've played with a lot of other people, once you find that magical spark that you have with someone musically and creativity wise, then it's hard to replace that, and it's almost irreplaceable in my mind. You know?
Well, it's kind of like
I mean,
all relationships. There's no replacing any one of them. But
correct. Yes, there's no replacing any one of them. I like that.
There are sparks everywhere, though, Jyn.
Yeah, you're right. And I know people can always be replaced, but in my heart,
people will never be replaced.
Yeah, I mean,
and that spark will never be replaced. But there's a different kind of spark with somebody else.
I agree.
Around the corner.
Yeah, and I always think that when one door closes, another one opens up. That's what Miss Dolly Parton says, who I love dearly. Well, we're gonna take a short break, and I'm gonna continue talking to you, Miss Cheyenne Mize, because you've just got the most interesting stuff going on. You ever heard of Government Mule?
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite tracks. It's called Greasy Granny's Gopher Gravy, and it's awesome. You're locked on to LRS102.com. That is Free by Cat Power. You're locked on to Jyneration Nation, LRS102.com. I'm the generator, Jyn Yates. I am joined by the lovely Cheyenne Mize. Cheyenne picked that one. You picked that.
I did.
Yeah.
I love me some early Cat Power.
Yeah, I tell you what, great. You've got a great musical, just background of everything. You're kind of, all over the place with your styles, which I love. Yeah, from classical to country, and you love that old type country too.
Oh yeah, as old as you can find.
Yeah. In fact, we were talking about the Buck Owens track. I really love that one. I had never heard that, nor had I ever been asked to play it. When I got that set list, I was like, this is the most interesting set list I think I've ever.
Yeah, we were trying to find all these different tunes with the theme of wildness, of wild. So that cigarettes and whiskey and wild women came up.
Well, that sounds right up my alley. It was right up my alley. I love some old Buck Owens. I remember my grandparents, spinning the vinyl and listening to the old radio stations that. They just love that stuff, and I still think it holds up today more so than any of this new pop rock rap country.
Yeah, my love of country ends around mid-90s, I think, but up until then I'm a huge fan.
Yeah. Do you know who Marvin Maxwell is?
Yeah.
He owns Mom's Music. He has a theory that I worked beside him for a long time, and I consider him like a dad almost. He has this theory about country music. He said in the late 60s, early 70s, that all the drummers were looking for work, all the rock and roll ones out in L.A., and he was out there, off and on during this time. He was doing a lot of stuff for Dick Clark and all kinds of really cool things. He says that a lot of them found work in Nashville. So, therefore, they transported back to Nashville. And then all of a sudden in the 80s and into the 90s, you start to hear all this rock and roll drumming behind country music, which prior to that, it was just like brushes on a snare drum. There wasn't a lot of drums in country music. And then it started becoming more rock and more pop and more, of course, Dolly kind of took it over, I think, and went straight pop with it, and I love her more than anything. She's one of my all-time favorite idols.
Yeah.
But yeah, so country music today is very interesting. And now when I tune in, which is not very often, but when I'm scrolling across the dial, I'll hear hand claps, electronic hand claps in country, and all kinds of like weird stuff going on. So to me, I don't know if you call it Americana, whatever that branch is of that old style, that is definitely the best style and holds up today.
Yeah, I agree.
So when you were a kid, what was your first love? Was it classical music? Because you were playing in
No,
orchestras?
it's definitely country. I mean,
Country, all the way, huh?
Before I was playing in orchestras, I was living in western Kentucky in Trigg County, near Cadiz, and there was really only country radio stations there. That was pretty much it. Loved me some Tim McGraw at that time, some Patty Loveless.
I love that.
And older stuff, Carter Family and all that. My grandma played that kind of stuff. And then, of course, classic rock. I grew up with all of that in my home, just, again, my parents being rock DJs and all that. So I grew up with a lot of Jimi Hendrix, a lot of Pink Floyd, a lot of Led Zeppelin, a lot of Bob Marley. Oh, yeah, that was kind of the background. The fabric of my musical growing up. But then when I moved to Louisville, when I was about 10 and started playing in orchestras and getting into a lot of other stuff, I got an electric guitar for my 13th birthday, I think, and started getting into a lot more modern rock, and then found a lot of lady rockers, which were really huge and influential, including Cat Power, kind of expanded from there. Yeah,
your story is very similar to mine. I come from a very small town, 3,600 population. We had one radio station. It was the Classic Gold Country station. And I was going to tell you, you'll love this. The first gig I ever played, big one, opening for Tim McGraw when I was like 14, 15.
What? Amazing.
That was back before he was married to Faith Hill. And what was so weird about that is it was at a county fair. Of course, I grew up playing county fairs, and VFW Post and fire departments and stuff like that. Anyway, we didn't have bars where I was from. It was a dry county, so that you couldn't even go get alcohol or anything like that. But yeah. So I remember that well because I always thought that was an interesting gig. And looking back, it was a big gig, and I got to meet him and go on the tour bus and all this cool stuff. But he was a nobody really when we signed on to do it. And then literally like a month before the gig, he hit it with Don't Take the Girl, an Indian Outlaw. And that skyrocketed him. And then next thing you know, there's like thousands of people that show up at this gig in my little hometown at this, the little county fair. So that was awesome. And then I went on to do some work with the Headhunters. They're all from my area. My dad was playing music down there. And where I'm from, you had to play country music. You couldn't get away from playing that. So I was growing up in bands with guys who were a lot older than me when I was like 13, 14 years old, playing a lot of country, southern rock, Leonard Skinner, all that kind of the Outlaws, all that
Sweet
kind
Home
of stuff.
Alabama was the first song I ever learned on guitar.
Was it really? That's hilarious.
Made my uncle teach it to me.
I love it. What do you think about the Kid Rock remake of that?
I don't think I've heard that.
Oh, yeah.
I probably wouldn't choose to.
Yeah, probably. No, you can say anything you want on this show. That's why did you know you can even cuss on the show? If you accidentally drop something, what we do is we put money in a swear jar and then we donate it to charity at the end of the month so that we cuss for a good cause and nobody gets mad at us.
There you go.
Yeah. If we accidentally, spin a track that's got a cuss word in it or something like that.
It's good to know.
Yeah. So LRS on the way back up. But yeah, the only reason I've actually listened to it is because Cindy Blackman sent, he has a female drummer, Kim, who is on that track, who's really good. That's the only reason I really listened to her. But dislike his politics. There's a lot of things I do not like about that kind of style of stuff. In fact, I have to bring this up just because it's funny to me, and it makes for great radio. Somebody told me one time they were trying to diss me, and they're like, well, you're nothing compared to Kid Rock. That's what they said to me, and it's always cracked me up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I looked at them, and I was like, I don't think you'll ever see Kid Rock playing in an orchestra. That was my response, Yeah, so anyway, I just had to bring that up because I thought it was funny. Let's talk about your Dublin move, right? You're moving to Dublin?
I am moving to Dublin, Ireland, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about what you're going to be doing over there because I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I applied last year for this fellowship called the Atlantic Fellows, and it's a philanthropic group who have made all these programs all around the world to address different types of equity or inequity, really. So they have social equity and racial equity and food equity and health equity projects all over the world.
Yeah.
And they bring together multidisciplinary groups from all over the world to kind of be a brain trust and tackle each issue for a year. So the one that I applied for was for health equity and brain health, and it's studying brain health and dementia specifically. And it happens to be based in both Dublin and at the University of California in San Francisco. So there are, we have cohorts in each place. We get together sometimes and do, we do some things together, but mostly I'll be studying with the folks in Dublin, working for Trinity College.
Wow.
So I'm kind of I'm an employee of the college, but also studying there, and then also working in some of the local hospitals doing my community development through music and arts, and then working on a grant proposal and hopefully coming back with funding from the program in the fall of 2020.
Okay.
And doing some more great work across the state of Kentucky. I've been lucky enough to do some really, really great projects the past couple of years, and the biggest one was basically we were producing a play all across the state of Kentucky in 12 different nursing homes.
Cool.
They were all signature healthcare homes in rural places in Kentucky, and we, over a year and a half, we worked with the folks inside of the homes to devise this play, and then engaged a lot of community artists in each of those places to then put on the play, and then invited people from the community to come and see it. And the whole thing was not just, the play itself, but it really was changing the idea of a whole community of what that building is, instead of it being like a place where everybody's grandmas go to die. It's like it's a cultural hub. It's our place of history and all of our stories, all of our history, all of our wisdom, all of our knowledge, all of our everything, all of our experience, are in these buildings, that we forget that, and we kind of just think like they're expired already.
Right.
And so just changing people's ideas of what that is, and using music and other art forms to kind of make that connection. And also, hopefully, I'll be doing some of that in Dublin. Planning to do more of that when I come back home.
So you return in 2020?
Yeah, September 2020. So
September
1 year.
2020. Rockin', man. Well, I can't wait to see what you do with that. That's fascinating to me. So basically, you're studying dementia specifically, and how music can help heal that. Have you seen any of that firsthand with your own eyes?
Yeah, and it's not so much using music to heal dementia. That is not
Right.
what I'm doing.
Right.
But using music and other art forms to contribute to brain health of an entire population, not just of elders with dementia, but looking at what that is over a lifetime. Group music making, or this idea of being involved with a creative task with a group of people. I mean, we know how important this is for our brains, but there's a lot of people that wouldn't consider themselves musicians with a capital M or artists with a capital A, and they wouldn't be as comfortable engaging in those things. But if you get folks in a room doing something creative in the moment with another group of people, there's a lot of things that actually happen inside of the brain, and looking into that. I mean, there's evidence to show that it changes immunity levels and takes down your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormones, which affects a lot of things in your body. And a lot of what we're just starting to find out more about dementia and what goes on is specifically Alzheimer's, and there's so much that creativity can do, and my hypothesis is that it is contributing to some amount of brain health, if not keeping away some amount of dementia at some point. But in the end, really, I just want people making music together. That's kind of
that's so cool.
really
Gosh,
cool.
I could talk to you all day about that. As a teacher of 12 years myself, I've taught a lot of autistic kids over the years. And at first I wasn't for sure about doing that, but I did. And I, over a course of 5 or 6 years, started to see this huge difference with these kids that I'd taken, because I taught them for so long. And so then I went to the parents and I said, do you mind if I videotape some of our classes, me teaching your kid, the autistic kids? And they absolutely were totally fine with it. So I started to document all that, because I was seeing it change kids' lives that were physically ill or had some sort of, disability or whatnot. And I was like, people need to see this, right? So I started doing all this, putting it online. Because of that, a lady contacted me about a women drummers documentary. And then there's also going to be a women drummers feature film that's going to come out in September of this year in Nashville. It's actually worldwide, but they're doing the premiere in Nashville. And it talks specifically, they put a whole segment in there of me teaching these autistic kids and talking about how music can change their lives. I mean, some of these kids, they couldn't even hold drumsticks physically. When they came to me, they had shakes, or I've taught kids with tics. I currently have, people diagnosed with certain types of cancer, like brain cancers and stuff like that. And if nothing else, I've seen it change their lives. It makes them more confident. It makes them more happy. As I'm not a music therapy major, but I feel like kind of what I do is music therapy in that sense.
Sure.
You're giving a gift to, a child who, like I said, might shake, and then 4 years later, they've busted through every single problem they have, and they don't have those ailments anymore.
Yeah.
And the parents credited it to their music lessons.
Sure. And it's just a really fine line about like using music therapeutically, and then like capital letters like music therapy, and really the only difference is what your goals, what primary goals you have, right? So with music therapy, my primary goals are not musical, my primary goals are non-musical, and then we're also doing music.
Health,
whereas well, they could be cognitive, they could be physical, they could be any emotional, psychological, any of that, but certainly lots of teachers have other non-musical goals in mind. They're teaching music, and their first goals are musical, and then they also keep in mind those other non-musical goals, which is really important for students, because it can also be such a huge way that people grow up and learn how to be able to express themselves and use that as a tool over their lifetime. So it's really important.
One thing I love about it is watching the kids build their confidence levels, because a lot of the students that I get are ones that aren't necessarily like the cool kids. They're kind of the weird, awkward, creative ones. And then when they finally play music at their school or something like that, they come back to me and they're all excited, and they're like, everybody in school wanted to talk to me, and now I'm popular, and their confidence levels just skyrocket. It's so amazing what music can do for everybody. I mean, there's so many assets, and facets of it. Mind-blowing. So thank you for what you do, because that's really cool.
Yeah, that's been one of the hardest parts right now, getting ready to move, is having to transition all my music therapy clients, and I do have some students as well, and just trying to find good teachers to take them over and make sure that they're all taken care of, because I have some music therapy clients I've been seeing for over 10 years now. So we are part of each other's families, and it's hard to leave those folks too.
Yeah, well, I just that's just so fascinating to me, and safe journeys and all that good stuff when you go overseas. I love the idea that you're doing that, and it seems like you have a profound love in your heart for music and what you do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, music is kind of everything. I do it in all of what I do.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I can tell.
And it's super exciting though. There's I've already have a kind of connections to a lot of musicians over in Dublin, so I'm looking forward to playing music there too. Yeah,
because have you toured through Dublin before, prior to this?
Maiden Radio played there last year, and that's the first time. But yeah,
super cool, man. I have yet to get to play overseas. I've done Canada and everywhere else across the United States, but not ever over the pond, as they call it. But I hear it's a completely different scene over there, that they really do enjoy like American musicians.
Yeah,
over
absolutely.
there. Yeah. Did you have a good experience with that?
Yeah,
cool.
I always have. It's been great.
Yeah. Well, we're going to spin some tracks that you've picked out here, and one of them is PJ Harvey. Stay tuned. You're locked on to Jyneration Nation with Cheyenne Mize and Jyn Yates. It's Pink Floyd, Obscured by Clouds. I am Jyn Yates. You're locked on to LRS102.com. I'm joined by the lovely Cheyenne Mize, awesome musician, music therapist, has traveled the world doing music. Man, I'm very jealous of your career. Not really jealous, but I mean proud of you, I guess, for your career. That's so cool.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, and to only be your age, that's pretty awesome. You know what I mean? Have you found any like flack? Do you get any flack sometimes? Do you feel like on a local level for your success?
I guess it just depends on how you define success, because when I was doing some solo stuff, I had some really great fortunate things that happened with like getting some play on NPR and having a couple stories written there, and also being able to play the Tiny Desk and things like that. But
cool.
At the end of the day, that didn't really do anything, and none of those things equaled money.
Right.
Of course, which I don't care about making money. It's just that in order to do that thing and continue to do that thing, I needed to start making money at it.
I hear you.
So I never really, I've never made money playing my own music.
Really?
Never.
Oh.
I've only
You
ever
mean
lost
original?
money. Yeah, I've only ever lost money playing my own music.
I could probably say the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've only spent money to play my own music, which it turns out playing my own songs that I write is not like what I feel like I need to do in the world.
Really?
So that's not like, I mean, I still want to do that, and I still have, we were just talking while the music was playing, I have 3 new songs that I recorded with some great local musicians, Corey Smith, Neil Argabright, and Tori Fisher, and I call them The Familiar. So they were my band for this group of songs last year that, they're more in the rock vein, and I had about, I just had these 3 songs, wanted to get them documented, and still figuring out how I'm going to put those out. I intend to put those out by the end of the year, so I'll have to send them your way. But
we were just talking about that, how that process works for artists. You wrote them 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And you're just now getting around to trying to get them out.
Yeah, and then it took a year after we recorded them for me to get the time to like make, get the other parts figured out, and I still haven't figured all of that out. So it's just, I love that for my own creative process, but it's never been a thing that I felt like I needed to get my music in the world for other people to hear.
Right.
That's never been a driving force for me, fortunately.
Yeah, I hear you.
So the rest of it is more just
because
like
you would just be spending money.
Yeah, figuring out ways that I can cheat the system
Right.
so that I just get to play music all the time.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm right there with you, sister.
If there was never a stage involved, I would be super happy. I don't care about that. I actually love the studio work more than I love
I agree.
stage work.
I
It's
love,
my favorite.
and it's so interesting to me because I feel like I crave to be busy, for one. Obviously, in music, and doing multiple projects always makes me happy. I like to be a little scattered. I might have 3 different bands going on at once, or
Sure.
you know how it goes. Again, you got to hustle. And I was never in music for the money. I left radio making a ton of money at age 30 because I realized that my time was more valuable than money, and I gave up a lot of money to pursue something I loved instead, which was music and teaching. Thank God every day that I, was a teacher, because that way I was able to sustain a career and be able to play out. Playing on a stage was never, bringing me a huge income like you were saying. I love to play live, and I never did want to do solo work to be like, I want to get my music out for people to listen to. For me, it was a therapy thing for myself. It was like, I love to sit and come up with my own ideas. I like to try to play all my own little parts, and I'm not the greatest musician in the world, but I'm not too shabby either, you know what I mean? So for me, it wasn't about, hey, I want to get this out because I want the world to hear it. It was, hey, I want to put this out because it's therapy to myself, and it's a healing process. I feel like I get closure with my music for things that I might not get closure with in my everyday life, but I never ever thought, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money doing originals. You know, I don't think anybody with a realistic attitude goes into it like that.
Yeah. Well, hope not, because they're going to be sadly disappointed.
Sadly disappointed. Right.
But no, as far as getting flack on the local level, I don't really think so. I think my first solo album, there was a write-up in the Leo that was maybe a little bit salty.
Ooh, I like that, salty. Ooh, I needed my sound effect for that, darn it.
Salty.
Salty. Wait a minute. Oh, it's not coming through. Wait, hang one more time.
Salty.
Salty. There it is.
It was, which is fine. I never, again,
Why do you think that was? I'm just curious.
I don't know. They didn't like it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about music, is it's subjective to the listener,
Yeah. And I don't expect everybody to like me or like my music. And there's music out there that I don't like, and
Correct.
that's fine. And fortunately, there's been a lot of other people who have contacted me and told me how, this or that song or this or that lyric or whatever really meant something to them.
I'm a big fan.
And that's
just
been
FYI.
huge, so thanks. I appreciate that.
I've gotten a lot of flack in my stuff.
Yeah.
But just because I'm quite ballsy, I
Yeah.
will say, to say some of the things that I say. But I just literally write what happens to me. I
Yeah.
always write the truth. You
Well,
know?
mine is, my music is all it's pretty moody, and it's pretty much just like, it's very feelings based. And so for somebody else to criticize that really doesn't mean anything to me.
Right, exactly.
Because it was just how
Yeah.
I was feeling at the time. And so, like, it's okay if that's
Right.
not how,
Yeah.
if you don't get it.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
if you don't dig it,
Yes.
that's fine too.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah.
okay.
And I talked about this with Allison Cross, who you said you went to school with, who was in
we're
on
good
Friday.
buds. I love her.
I love her too. We were talking about, she was about to put out some original work, and she said, but I wrote it about something, and she was like, I'm really worried about what they're going to think when I put it out. And I said, Allison, you can't go into it thinking that way. I would have never released any song if I was worried about what the person I wrote it about was going to think.
Absolutely.
It's their choice to listen to it or not. And I was like, you have to put that on the back burner. And she was like, wow, I needed that, Yeah.
I think there's really, Harry Pickens, who's a local musician, jazz musician,
we love
piano player.
Harry Pickens, yeah.
Also does a lot of great work around the community, and he did some work at U of L when I was going there, and came and spoke to us a couple times about performance anxiety and that kind of thing, because he had some really debilitating performance anxiety early on in his
Really?
career that he had to overcome before he could do any of the stuff he ended up doing. And one of the things he told us, which I think a mentor had told him, I can't remember who, but he said, he said you can't, it's not even that, you can't concentrate on what other people think. It's actually not any of your business.
Yeah.
And it turns out that, like, people are entitled to their own thoughts and their own
Correct.
opinions and their
Yeah.
own, likes and dislikes. And it's not only just something you can't waste your time
Yeah.
dealing with, but it's also none of your business.
Right. And you
They're
shouldn't
entitled
stress
to
over
opinions
it.
about you.
Correct.
They're
Yeah.
entitled to opinions about your music, and now how they express it, you can take issue with that, because obviously there's
Yeah.
a time and a place. But yeah,
I think sometimes
try to
as
listen to
artists,
that.
we're very emotional. We wear our hearts on our sleeves a lot of times, and maybe a little bit more so than some others, I feel like we take things to heart sometimes. And I know that early on in my career, I've had so many people stand right next to me and tell me they thought I sucked on drums, and so I was like, had I've listened to them, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, which I feel like is a good thing for the world, teaching kids and giving them the gift and passing them on the tools, and, letting them run with their creativity and always encouraging them. Anyway, I just feel like you can't take that into consideration, because like you said, it's how you're feeling at the time. You're expressing yourself, you're putting it out there. It's subjective. People can make opinions all they want, but they also don't have to listen either, is the way I look at it. I always say thanks for listening though, because it is what it is. So I agree. I think I don't know, the creative process is so interesting, but sometimes we can be a little touchy about things, but also that's what a true artist does. A true artist writes about their life. I do know that people write songs sometimes just on a general, trying to come up with something about a tree or whatever. But I think most true artists that we can feel their music through are writing about somebody,
Yeah, I really look up to a lot of artists, because this is not how I write. I look up to a lot of artists who write from other perspectives
Yeah,
as well, and
that's
write kind
hard.
of story songs and write about other people's lives. Just to, I recently was listening to a really influential woman in Kentucky traditional music, in that whole scene, old time scene, Sue Masick. She's a Kentucky master, and had a band that was really influential, all female, old time string band.
Oh, cool.
The Real World String Band. And
I need to get her on my show.
Yeah, you do. She's great. But also writes, she writes all of these really emotional songs, but kind of about other people's situations. She really comes from that, like, activism place of, like, almost like writing labor songs and old, like, coal mining songs, but telling the strife that other people have gone through to try to tell their story, to give it a platform. And I really admire that as well. I've not really gotten there in my songwriting yet.
Yeah, I hear you. Songwriting is an interesting thing. There's so many different approaches to it, and you can obviously write with any one type of instrument. I tend to write more beats first, obviously, to more rhythmic type stuff. Have you ever taken any classes on songwriting or anything like that?
I don't think so.
Yeah. I once did this record called Welcome to the Queendom with a Juilliard opera vocal grad who is in Arkansas. And she was in a group that once a week they would give you a prompt for music and a prompt for writing lyrics. And it could be anything. It could be, you know, today we're writing about mountains and the sky and the moon, and your musical prompt is it has to be in a major key or something, you know, just something like that. And then you had a couple weeks to come up with a song and produce it, and then you would send it over and everybody would listen to each other's songs. And that I became a part of that, and that really like forced me to try to write every day, or like almost weekly, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Which
I'd
I
be
felt
really
like
into that, I think.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And then I've took some clinics on, you know, more of the acoustic-y guitarist that writes stuff. Like, I love Brandi Carlile. I mean, her writing is so, I mean, it's just amazing. And obviously Dolly Parton, those type of singer-songwriters that write. I never had that gift, but wow, some people can just write songs that just pluck your heartstrings, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's hard to do, I feel like, unless it's coming from a, you know, there, like you were saying, there were people that have written songs like that from a different perspective. That blows my mind because I feel like that is something I don't know that I could ever master. But I guess that they probably, I would love to talk to them. They probably did. I know people who sit down and try to write a song a day. That's a hard thing to do, you know, but again, you can't get better at anything unless you do it constantly.
Yeah, one of these songs that really got me of Sue's, I can't remember the name. The song is called Broadway Lullaby, and not really for this show. I think maybe another time. But Sue is talking about coming into Louisville and getting off the Jefferson exit and kind of being faced with the homeless camp there every time she got off the interstate, and wrote from a woman's perspective of living in that camp, a woman living in that camp. She saw something that kind of made her think that there was a woman living in this one little area, and just kind of thinking about what that would be like, and it's devastating.
Yeah. I've talked a lot about homelessness and Louisville's homelessness problem here, because it seems like they just keep wiping them out and then they move like a block over. Like now they're a block this way behind us, you know, and I'm always like, what can we do? And I'm always urging the Christian community out there to open their doors to the homeless, because you have tons of pews that, you know, what would Jesus do? I think he would open his doors and let them sleep there.
Seems to make sense.
But even more so than the homeless problem, there's a lot of mental health issues that kind of thread through that as well. If we don't start tackling our mental health issues in this country, as we've seen all these shootings and stuff like that are going on. And I myself diagnosed with PTSD from a very young age, a high anxiety disorder, and was misdiagnosed and put on all types of different medications for seizures and stuff like that when I was young. Weaned myself off of them in my 20s against doctor's orders, and then started seeking out a therapist who changed my life and was like, you have zero signs of any of the diagnosis that they had given you. You should have never been on seizure medications and all this stuff. And I do feel like somehow that kind of like messed some of my emotional, mental state up a little bit, maybe psychologically a little bit too. But I've worked really hard with a strong psychotherapist for many years to try to overcome all of that.
Yeah, and I don't think you're alone in that. And even with medications for things that you know, people think are more benign, even you know, long-term birth control use and long-term use of these you know, ADHD drugs that they're starting kids on at like 4 years old.
Oh, I know. Every kid I
have no
you know.
idea how those are affecting people later in life. And my hypothesis is not very well. They're not affecting people very well.
Yeah. Which is obvious, because if they were working, we would not have all these school shootings and, you know, everything like that that's going on in the world. It's a very scary world out there right now. Great people out there. I've met some of the best people in the world across this United States and Canada and everywhere in my travels. But if I had a child right now, I think I would just be in a hot mess ball crying all the time, just worried sick about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that'd be rough. I think it's going to be interesting over the next year living in Dublin and kind of doing what I can to both be like an advocate for the good things that are happening here, and particularly in the state of Kentucky. You know, Mitch McConnell's very well known around the world right now.
Yeah, by the way, go ahead.
Yeah. So anyways, I think there's going to be a lot of like taking up for Kentucky, but also like commiserating with a lot of folks saying like, no, you've got it right. There's a giant group of people in the U.S. who are very unhappy with what's going on too, but I think that's going to be an interesting perspective to watch it from afar for the next year.
Yeah. I wanted just to intervene. I don't know if you saw what was going on at Mitch McConnell's house last night here in Louisville, Kentucky. Were you paying attention to that?
No, I didn't see the story.
Okay,
yet.
I don't watch news. I don't even own a television. I haven't in years. Don't care anything about it. I get my news from the internet, obviously, or my phone. And last night they were protesting. He just broke his arm supposedly, and it's right when and the timing of it is is questionable because he's supposed to be dealing with gun laws right now, and I think people feel like he's just avoiding it, not paying attention because he doesn't care. Either way, they were protesting outside of his Louisville house last night, like midnight or 1 o'clock, with cowbells, and they had like snow shovels with hammers, and they're just like banging these things outside of his house all the way around his house last night, the protesters. And I thought that's kind of hilarious. They're out there with cowbells, just trying to make noise because he wouldn't answer phone calls and he wouldn't answer his door, but they know he's there because he's posted pictures on social media with his arm hurt.
Right.
It's
That's
just
an interesting tactic, more like psychological warfare than
I know, right?
political.
Let's go outside and bang cowbells. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, if any of it'll work, that'd be be great. But I have a feeling there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to.
We're going to have to find some other ways of making things move forward here in the near future.
I do love the chick that's going up against him. That's going to be interesting to watch. Yeah. And as I told you earlier, I got out of radio because I was having to cover politic news. I had to work beside Mitch McConnell. I had to cover Frankfurt stuff. And that was just, I had to carry a pager around. You'll listen to this. This was the defining moment. And this was in my 30s, my late 20s, early 30s. I had a pager on my side from the morgue that anytime somebody in Louisville got shot and killed, it went off. And I had to contact the morgue to get the information on the person for the news media the next day. And I mean, that thing was going off all the time. And at one point, I found myself, and since you're a music therapist, you'll probably understand this. I found myself just becoming very numb to death. I had already experienced a lot of death in my life growing up as a child. Working in it and having to report on it every single day and call the morgue every single day, multiple times, to get information on people who've been shot and killed. God forbid it's somebody you know what I mean? Was just traumatic for me. Yeah. And finally, I just said, you know what? I'm just going to go do music. I don't think this is the right thing for me to be a part of.
I think there's a lot to be said for secondary trauma, and this happens to a lot of caregivers, but also, and healthcare workers, but also, people working in media, and also just everybody like reading this stuff too. There's this whole, this secondary trauma is a real thing. So everybody take care of themselves.
Yeah, explain secondary trauma to people that may not have a clue what that is.
Just the idea that even if you don't experience something firsthand, you hearing about it or internalizing that story can cause a lot of similar traumatic traumatic.
I'm diagnosed PTSD, so that's basically exactly what that is. I mean, it's reliving that trauma over and over and over again, and it doesn't matter whether you see it or hear it or smell something that triggers it. That's another reason I don't watch a lot of television. I don't like to see a lot of violence. I don't want to see blood. It triggers me for things. And thank God for my therapist, because now I understand that, because her main goal was to get me to recognize what was triggering the trauma, and then once you can recognize what's triggering it, then you can work on protecting yourself from it.
Yeah. And so I'd say for anybody out there just getting real down with looking at the news, and sometimes it's just too heavy, and it's okay to turn it off and go do something that feels good to you.
Yeah, go walk in the park.
Go do something that feels
drink some
good.
water, exercise, eat something good, watch something great. There are some people that literally sit in these little small towns, and y'all know I love you. It's probably half my family, but they sit and just watch these, news. It's on a 24 cycle now. It's the job that never ends. Another reason I wanted to get out of it is because you can never take off. News never stops. Killings always happen. Something's always going on. That's and no offense, but the news is very rarely on a positive level.
That's true.
Yeah. I felt like it was taking a toll on me
Yeah.
psychologically and mentally and emotionally, and I was like, adios.
Yeah, there was a whole thing that Nina and I kind of cooked up at one point for Strive. We were going to start this thing that was going to go viral, where instead of posting all these awful things on social media, we were just going to like get people to just like once a day like post something good that happened to you.
Yeah,
So
what
at
good
least
happened to you, right.
Yes, like what is good.
Yeah.
And let's all
Do you
ruminate
know-
on those things instead.
Do you know the Troubadours of Divine Bliss?
Mm-hmm.
I love them. They officiated and played the funeral yesterday, and they are just magical souls, and they're always preaching exactly what you just said. I have never seen anybody quite like them before in music, and I always call it the anointed musicians. I feel like you are probably an anointed musician as well. Anointed musician to me is a player that doesn't just play music because they want to play music. They play their music to heal others, and there's something magical about them that people are drawn to for healing. You know what I mean? And I always feel like every time something traumatic in my life goes down, the Troubadours of Divine Bliss pop up with their little accordion and their guitar, and they're always like, I love you, you keep doing things for the greater good, greater good, and they're always so positive. And there is something about that I just love. Positivity does attract positivity. It really does. And negativity attracts negativity. And it's very detrimental. So I started a couple years ago really trying to pay attention, and I slipped, but really trying to pay attention to what I say, the negativity that comes out, versus trying to replace it with positivity, trying to always see the greater good in every situation, whether it's something traumatic that has happened or, I'm almost homeless or whatever's going on in my life at the time, going, there must be a greater reason for this. And then I started to see more positive things happen in my life. And I really am a big firm believer in that, and I feel like they're anointed in some way. And there's a lot of great musicians around town that are very similar to them, in that style. But they always just seem so positive. That's why I asked you if you knew them, because, gosh, they're just awesome people. Magical soul beings, philanthropic, always trying to do something for the homeless, or just great people all around. I like to use music in that sense too, to raise money for things, or to, raise awareness for things that we might not be paying attention to, like our homeless issue. Have you ever done any work concerning the homeless issue here in Kentucky?
I've played Give a Jam.
Okay.
That was happening at the Clifton Center a few years. I think it's still happening there now, even though it's not the same Clifton Center exactly. But several years in a row, I played the Give a Jam, which was one of the biggest fundraisers of the year for
Cool.
I can't remember what the organization was called, but one of the biggest organizations in town that helps out finding people homes and that. But that's it.
That's kind of close to my heart, because I've almost been homeless 3 times.
Yeah.
I haven't yet, but I've been on the verge, you know what I mean? Because trying to make it as a single musician is incredibly hard. People do not understand, you know what I mean? Not only is making it, and I've never been a codependent type. I've always been pretty independent just all around. I don't like anybody helping me try to pay my own bills, not saying I wouldn't want to be in a relationship or something like that. But I always had a different outlook, and I was always worried that if I settled, I would not be able to do what I wanted to do, which was music, you know what I mean? So I made a choice early on not to have kids, and to just pursue the career thing. And so far it's worked out pretty well, you know what I mean? I've got a lot of cool stuff coming out.
Yeah.
And you do too. I think that's amazing. I didn't even know that you did, hospital work. I knew you did music therapy, but I wasn't totally familiar with your background. But the whole Dublin thing, that's just fascinating to me, and I cannot wait to see the results of that. And maybe when you get back, you'll give us another interview and tell us all about what your experiences over there with that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a big part of the program that is coming back with funding to do a project here in Kentucky. So
Cool.
I'll be doing some cool stuff here as well.
Yeah. And what else when you get back in 2020, what else would you like to focus on? You were talking about like issues in Kentucky and, and trying to make the state a better place and whatnot. And I think that's very awesome.
I do. So I'm on the steering committee of a group called the Kentucky Rural Urban Exchange, and we are in our 6th year. And basically, every year we get about 70 people from across the state together in 3 different host communities all across the state, and the idea is just to experience each other and a place in a deeper way, and to kind of explore the commonalities that we have as Kentuckians, regardless of where we are. But it's also kind of gotten me, and now I know so much more about all these really amazing things going on all over the state, and people, have ideas about what Eastern Kentucky looks like, or Western Kentucky looks like, or whatever it looks like, but there's some really amazing and progressive stuff happening out there, and so I think getting back involved with them when I get back, and we just got a big National Endowment for the Arts grant, and also some other stuff going on. So we're looking forward to kind of the next steps with that. And there's even a grant that just came through to replicate RUX in another state. So that's our short name, RUX, the Rural Urban Exchange. Just doing what we can to.
You're saying that would get it into other states other than Kentucky. Yeah, that's super cool. So expanding it, basically.
Yeah, and just getting more folks involved and seeing what ways we can be more influential than just within our own little cell.
I feel like I've been to therapy today, which is probably a good thing, to tell you the truth. I think everybody needs a little therapy. That's my saying. If we all went to therapy, because a therapist changed my life, so for the better. One little story I wanted to tell you is my therapist, when I first started seeing her, and I love her, she really did just change my outlook, and she was very aggressive with me, which I was a little fearful of, but I totally respected her and let her do her thing. Well, she would say, oh, you've had, suicide experiences or whatever from your past. Okay, I need you to write about those. And then I would write, and then I'd come back in the next week and I'd have it and I'd hand it to her. And she's like, oh, no, you're going to read this to me. And then she would make me read my own story to her, which was very incredibly hard to get through. But one of the first things she said to me was, she said, you're a drummer. She said, you need to go to this place called Michigan Women's Music Festival, and you need to heal. And she said, and you need to meet this African drum lady named Ubaka Hill, and she's going to help you. And I was like, well, at the time, I'd never heard of Michigan Women's Music Festival, nor did I know what it was about. Nor did I know who Ubaka Hill was. I'm just in this room crying my eyes out for an hour, telling my story, and skip to 6 years after she told me that. Just by chance, I get a phone call from Julie Wolf, and Julie said, I want to hire you for Michigan Women's Music Festival. And I was like, that's kind of weird. That's what my therapist said I should have been doing like 5 years ago to heal. So I go to Michigan, I drive up there, and when you come onto the compound, basically you've got to go to an artist relations. They've got to check you in and do all this stuff and get you your space. So I go over to the artist place, and I don't know anybody there, and this African lady walks up to me and puts out her hand, and she goes, hi, nice to meet you, I'm Ubaka Hill. And I still get cold chills telling the story, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And it's a week-long festival, and then I played the festival on Wednesday night. On Thursday night, I had the night off, so I'm venturing through the crowd of thousands of women. There was like 10 to 12,000 women there. And up walks my therapist, who I had no idea would be there. And I said, wow. I was like, thank you. She said, I saw you last night play, and she was like, I'm so proud of you, And I was like, thanks. You told me I should be here 5 years ago. And I was like, the first person I met was Ubaka Hill. And she goes, yeah, isn't it healing? And I was just like, wow. It was an amazing experience that, just changed my life. Multiple things that she did helped change my life. But I'm always thankful for any kind of therapist, whether it be music therapist, psychotherapist, whatever kind of therapy you're involved in. This whole world is so hurting right now. It definitely needs to heal. And I'm a big fan that everybody should be in therapy. Yeah. So we're going to spin another song that you picked out here. It's called Link Ray. La-di-da. You're locked on to Jyneration Nation, LRS102.com. Video killed the radio star. I am Jyn Yates. You're locked on to Jyneration Nation, LRS102.com. I am joined by the lovely Cheyenne Mize. Cheyenne, you did not pick that one. I did. I'm a big fan of all that 80s rock and roll.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I'm kind of all over the board with my rock and roll. I like the classics. I like all the deep album cuts that people don't have a clue what are, which we've been spinning some of those today. All the way up until current. I don't know a lot about current. I've always been a rocker at heart. So any of that early punk stuff, and I love the new wave, like when the Cure and the Cult and all that kind of weird stuff that kind of came out in excess. I'm a big fan of all that new wave kind of type of rock and roll. But that's so cool, right? You can just literally pick anything because everybody's been influenced by rock and roll at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. In fact, when I was studying, backbeats in music are typically where the drum set player hits the snare drum, which in rock and roll is famous for 2 and 4. Like there's all those jokes, but if you're playing reggae or cut time or halftime, it's more like count 3 is accented with the backbeats and so forth. But rock and roll, really, a little bit prior to rock and roll, you had all that soul and Motown-y stuff and all that R&B type stuff that was coming out that had the backbeats in it. But people like Elvis demanded to have that there. There was something about that 2 and 4 hit that made people shake their booties. And so I've always heard that rock and roll was in the forefront just because of that and the electric guitar, which obviously you can relate to because you play electric guitar.
Yeah, also, I was just looking up the name of this documentary that I saw recently because that track that we just listened to before with Link Ray, he's a Native American rock and roll musician, and this documentary, I believe it's this one called Rumble, The Indians Who Rock the World. It's basically an entire documentary. I think it's on I don't know where it is now, but it's out there.
And nothing but like Native American rockers?
Yeah, so it's about all of these different people who you may or may not know were, or at least in part, Native American, and
in
how
music?
much in music and specifically in rock and roll, and how much Native music actually found its way into
That's fascinating.
music. And there's even this idea that speaking of drum specifics, like the 4 on the floor, when you hear the kick drum on every single beat, that is very much a very specific, like it kind of came out of Native American cultures. And
you can hear it from the doom da 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 doom da, that pattern. And I have always said 4 on the floor is the universal rhythm because it's found in every culture. It's in dance music. It's the one, in 4/4, it's the one thing that if I play, no matter what, if I play it right, people start to immediately move. And if you go into any nightclub, any dance club, Play, Connection, whatever was around back in the day, you're going to hear that thump, 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 thump. That's what they love. I mean, even today, if you drive down Bardstown Road, you're gonna hear that at some point. So I'm a big fan of that. Is a universal rhythm for I always talk about how rhythm is the foundation of music because you cannot have a melody without rhythm, but you can have rhythm without melody, and those are the 2 main parts other than the harmony that make up music. Obviously, we can write to nothing but drums, and we don't have to have any pitch percussion or pitched anything. Obviously, we want it there, but you don't necessarily have to have it. Are you familiar with Redbone, by the way? Because you were talking about, were they in that documentary?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I don't know, are you familiar with Fanny? Do you know who they are? I want to educate you on them if not.
I don't know if I do.
Well, they're Native American sisters that were, in the 1970s, considered the first all-female rock and roll band. I had the drummer Alice DeBurr on this show the first week. And they were also the first female band signed to a major record label with Capitol out in LA. And they toured the world. And I'm telling you what, Alice had the best stories. She was talking about smoking hash with Mick Jagger. She recorded at Apple Studios behind Ringo's drums using his microphones. Keith Moon would cover some of their stuff early on, but they just released all these YouTube videos online from back in the day when they were recording these records. They sent me all the records, which are amazing. I mean, they really were amazing female musicians, but also based in the Native American culture. So I'd be surprised if they're not in that documentary.
And they very well could. It's been a little while since I've seen it, and it's just amazing how many folks and how much influence that it's right there as soon as it's pointed out. You just don't even know it until you hear it.
Well, I'm a big fan of anything Native American. I have Cherokee running through my own blood, and my dad, he was a drummer, but he is a drummer, but he also was a huge Billy Jack fan. If you're familiar with any of the Billy Jack movies, basically Billy Jack was a character that helped the Native Americans when they were going through all that stuff, and he would always come in, and he kind of was like he was a kung fu dude, like karate guy, but he always wore this really cool hat. He was famous for that, and he's very famous for, in his movies, coming to save Native Americans when they were going through a lot of, discrimination and stuff, and they're still facing discrimination today. My friend Matt, he's from a Sioux tribe up in North Dakota, and in fact, his family has the land that they're trying to run that pipeline through. And he rides up there on a horseback every once a year to bring awareness to that. But he sets up teepees, like the real teepees, and he has spoken to the United Nations on behalf of his tribe. He's gone to the Capitol and done all this cool stuff, and he's based right here he's actually in Fort Knox, but he's close enough to Louisville. Anyway, I have a lot of respect for anybody in the Native American culture, because they really have faced a lot of horrible stuff over the years. If you look at history, unfortunately. I don't want to bring it down, but it's the truth, yeah. So, Cheyenne, is there anything that we've left out while we've got a few minutes left? Do you have any projects you want to put out there? Obviously, you're going to Dublin. I bet you're going to be writing a lot while you're over there, maybe.
That's my hope. I'm going to be studying a bit, and I definitely have some friends and connections over there, but not nearly as many as here to distract me.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to have a lot of self-study and music writing time. I do want to just say there's one project that I was a part of with Maiden Radio recently, and it is the Pine Mountain Sessions. My friend Daniel Martin Moore just produced this. I think it's going to be a double album, and he has 2 more albums worth of stuff that may not even go on that. It's going to come out later, but it's musicians and writers and poets from all over Kentucky, and he got them together at this beautiful settlement school, Pine Mountain Settlement School, and recorded everybody there. And it's to help the Kentucky Natural Lands Trust and the Pine Mountain, because this was land that was saved from being mined, and the mountain being torn apart. So great work being done on a lot of levels, but there are some of the most amazing Kentucky musicians and writers and poets on there. Maiden Radio does a track as well, but that just came out, and I have these songs to finish later on this year, and hopefully I'll get those out. And
where can our listeners find that track for the Maiden Radio? Is it online?
Good question.
Anywhere?
I think if you look up Pine Mountain Sessions, you'll find it somewhere.
Pine Mountain Sessions. So y'all go Google Pine
Hey,
Mountain
Internet.
Sessions. Yeah. And you tell them to, and they will. They will. I get messages all the time. Hey, I did this. You said I love it. Or they'll contact me and say, I love the artist you had on. Where can I find their music? Are you on YouTube, by the way?
Yeah.
Do you have some music on YouTube that people can check out?
I think all 3 of my albums are probably on there. 2 full lengths and an EP. But on all the streaming stuff, the Spotify and Pandora and things like that. And I have a website. It doesn't really do much, but you can check out some other things that I played on around Louisville. And everything from other country bands to metal.
I love that. Metal. What did you play? Did you do violin?
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say
it's like a really metal instrument when you plug it in.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the violin. I mean, and the fiddle, obviously. Growing up in the country, but always being a rocker. I had a girl in here the other day who said, "What's your main influences?" And she said, "Classical and metal." And I was like, "That's perfect." I kind of love that.
That's great.
But I feel like you have to be a virtuoso, in metal. If you can't be a bad player and try to play metal. It's kind of like bluegrass to me. You can't be a sucky player and try to play bluegrass. It's almost like a virtuoso style of music. You have to be very on top of your game and very good to play some of those mandolin parts and banjo parts and fiddle parts and whatnot, or whatever. So anyway, well, Cheyenne, it's been awesome having you in the studio. I really appreciate you coming in, especially before you're about to take off to Dublin.
Yeah, totally. And
I'm a big
everybody
fan.
out there, just check out that the Pine Mountain Sessions is doing a big show at the Kentucky Center for the Arts coming up here in the next couple weeks. So if you're interested in that,
Cool.
There's lots of local and Kentucky artists, and some of it is lovely and surprising.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm a big fan of everything you do. We thank you for your work on mental health, all the health stuff that you do with music, and talking about
Yeah.
the dementia stuff. And I wish you well on your journey and safe travels. I hope you get those tracks out.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'll send them your way first thing.
Absolutely. And I love that we met along our journey, and maybe
Yeah.
one day we'll be playing music together again. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you for coming in on our show.
Thank you, Jen.
I also love that your parents met, back in the day working for LRS. It's a super cool story. It
Thanks,
comes
LRS.
full circle. Yeah.
For
Thanks for
making
my
me.
parent, right, for making you, literally, yeah. And thanks, music, for helping both of us along our way.
Yeah.
It's Generation Nation. Tune in tomorrow. I'll be back from 2 to 4. You're locked on to LRS102.com, The Walrus, Louisville's Rock Stream. I'm leaving you with some Rolling Stones. And as always, stay groovy.